Just in terms of the people in the film, were they people that you knew already? Were they people that you kind of were friends of yours? And
yeah, some people were friends of mine. One of them was my uncle, but a lot of them were also just people I met like while doing research. So, and the stories too. Actually, they were a blend of my stories, my friends' stories, and the stories of actual historical people or the people I interviewed who didn't want to be in the film. So I kind of like mushed everything together. Yeah, created something semi-fictional, semi-historical, semi-documentary. Yeah.
Did you write was it scripted, or was it were they kind of given guidelines that they could kind of work within, or?
So it works differently for different people. Some people work better with a script. So I wrote a script for them, and they would. But it was always very important for me to give it to them first, and then they would change it and rewrite it into their own story and their own words. And some of them were just like, some of them couldn't work with scripts at all. So I would tell them a story and then tell them to tell the story back to me, you know. And some people I would just say, oh, you know, I kind of have an idea of this character, and then they would just make the whole character up, which is amazing. Yeah.
Was there a lot of people probably that you didn't use? Did you interview many people, or was sort of everybody here? Or?
No, the people. Well, these are the people I put in the film. Like I didn't cut anybody out, but there were a lot of stories. Like not stories, but a lot of details and things that I cut out. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I mean, you said that they some of them kind of transformed them a little bit themselves, and there's a lot of transformation going on in the film in general through sometimes through cinema, also through other means, and in particular, I guess the framing story of putting your voice in the future somewhere, right? You know, the sort of idea that this is all stuff from the present day, but we're seeing it from a vantage point that's 50 years from now. How did that? Was that another way of kind of maybe displacing your own voice, or how did that?
Well, actually, I didn't plan to use my own voice. So I thought I wanted to appear in my own film somehow, because it's something I've always been afraid of. So I wanted to do something that I'm afraid of. But the vantage point of the future, I mean, it's a way of looking at the present in a more critical way, I think. In a sense, I mean, we're already in the future. This film was shot in 2014. We are watching it from the future, so it's kind of, I don't know. I feel like that's the way cinema is. You know, like you watch something that is shot like 3-4 years ago or 50 years ago, and trying to make sense of it in the light of present-day events and everything. You know.
Yeah. I mean, in a sense, it's all editing is taking something that exists already, be it from this morning or 100 years ago, and reworking it, right?
Yeah, essentially you're seeing the past as the present, right? Yeah.
Do you find that with viewing the film too? I mean, you've probably seen this film many times, but you see it with new audiences and things like that, and now seeing a date like 2013, we have a sense that that's a few years. It's 3 years ago already. It's long past.
Yeah, definitely. Because when I made the film, it was before 2015, and everybody had all these expectations about 2015 and Singapore, and then 2015 came and went, and in actual fact, like the political. So the ruling party that you see in the film has been losing votes very steadily for the past decade, and so everybody thought that this. Oh, right. I forgot to qualify. 2015 is also the year of the elections. So it was a very important year for Singapore because it was the elections, it was Lee Kuan Yew's death, and it was the 50th anniversary, and it all kind of came together at the same time. So we all thought that something big was going to happen with the elections, but in actual fact, like the country had a huge swing back to the ruling party, like huge. It's like 70% voted for the ruling party, which is kind of shocking for everybody. Like it doesn't happen anywhere else in the world, even. You know? Yeah. So in a sense, it was all this like my sense of hope and this hope for change and transition and everything kind of just gone. Everybody was very disillusioned after 2015. So watching this film now after 2015, after the elections especially, is very, I don't know, kind of poignant for me.
Yeah.
To see how much hope we had and then it all got lost.
Yeah, but I think that ambivalence is already in the film, right? I mean, you have this. I mean, the way that you begin the film with sort of light and darkness and fire as something that's maybe destructive, maybe creative, but it's definitely a little bit more, in some ways, you're emphasizing the destructiveness of it, or it's something that you want to...
Yeah, I mean, it's also how my ambivalence towards cinema. Like, I think cinema is very powerful, but it can be directed towards like either way, and people can always take words out and images out of context, which people have done with this film too, actually.
How so?
So somebody in Singapore wrote that the cult leader was Lee Kuan Yew, and just wrote an entire article about how Lee Kuan Yew destroyed the Malay film industry, and that was really disappointing to me. Yeah.
But he's not Lee Kuan Yew.
No, yeah, he's a metaphor, right? He's a fictional character. Yeah.
But this is I wrote down the evil of cinema. I mean, this is something that is this ambivalence is sort of already in the film.
Yeah.
Of this process of kind of reordering fragments that is going on here can also be done in a kind of negative way.
Right, and when the audience watches the film, the audience also reorders the film and kind of creates a new film in their heads. And like it's not. I mean, of course, it's a different film from the film I imagined. There's no right film, of course, but it's still it's still the film taking on a life of its own, and I have no control over it, and that's extremely scary for me. I think, yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about, just because this comes up in the film, and I happen to know, I mean, you made this sort of with a kind of collective, is that right, or it was sort of involved? At least this 13 images is
13
kind of
little pictures.
Yeah, 13 little pictures. Sorry.
Yeah.
The relationship between the sort of past and present of Singapore film industry and production, and how easy it is or difficult it is.
Yeah, I mean that's something that I was very interested in addressing in the film too, because in the 50s, Singaporean cinema was a Malay cinema, and it was in the Malay language, And Singapore cinema today is kind of it's kind of like a renaissance, because for 40 years there was no cinema at all. And now it's a Chinese cinema, like it's a Chinese language cinema with Chinese directors and everything. And I think that's like, it's like this complete amnesia of the past. We don't even, all these Malay films that I kind of show in the background of the film, nobody knows them at all. Nobody has seen them. They are not shown on TV very often, not in the cinemas or anything. So it's a very big disconnect between my generation and the generation of the 50s and 60s. So I mean, that was part of the film, was trying to see how the 50s and 60s, how did they survive or not survive in us today, How we kind of, or how we are unconsciously affected by, the things that happened in the past,
Are those those older films, are they preserved? Are they?
Not really, no. They were made by studios. The studios are still around, but they're not making films anymore, and they have no interest in these films.
Right.
They're just rotting somewhere, Yeah.
It's interesting that I had sort of forgotten the history of the Shaw Brothers' involvement, which is interesting. I mean, they had the Shaw Brothers, some of you may know, like some of the sort of martial arts films that the Shaw Brothers made, especially in the 60s and 70s, are sort of famous for that. Big influence on Tarantino, for example. But they also made many other types of films, like musicals, and they worked in South Korea, they worked in Singapore, and
actually in Singapore, it was before the industry in Hong Kong took off. So the industry in Singapore was around in the 40s and 50s, and it was very big then. in the 60s, it kind of went into decline. And that's when Hong Kong cinema became really, it kind of took off, like after, with all the martial arts films and the Chang Che films and all that.
And it was Malay language because that was what the major sort of audience was at that time?
Well, no, actually, in Singapore, Malays have always been a minority.
Yeah.
It's always been majority Chinese. But they made films for the region, like Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia. They all spoke kind of a common language. So it was kind of like the hub of that, the filmmaking in that language. And it's ironic that it's in Singapore, which is like a Malay minority country. But Singapore at the time was also the intellectual hub of Malay culture, So everybody came to Singapore. It was kind of like the crossroads of everything. Yeah, and unfortunately that's all lost today. Nobody has any memory of that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as far as filmmaking today goes in Singapore, it's was it you were kind of working with other filmmakers?
No,
in this, or
no. For this film, I was working on this myself. I mean, I was like literally shooting and doing sound myself.
Yeah.
So it was all me, and I edited everything myself, and I was the voice. Yeah. I kind of went through a phase where I fell out with a lot of my collaborators, and I just started to prefer working alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That happens. Throw it back to you guys.
I'm curious about how you see yourself in terms of your work within the tradition of essay filmmaking. And talk a little bit about that. Or maybe you don't feel part of it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this film is such a mashup of genres that I don't know if it's an essay film. It's kind of documentary, kind of fiction, kind of essay film. I don't know, kind of experimental in some parts. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, when I was editing, I did and I got stuck. I tried watching, Chris Marker, right? Because I was like, let's try this, and then it didn't work at all. It was like terrible, actually. Like I saw 10 minutes of Song Soleil and I couldn't finish it because I'm like, fuck, this is not like the film I want to make. So it made me even more stuck. So actually, reading was helping me more than cinema. So I didn't watch many films when I was editing. I was reading a lot of poetry and crime novels, and those helped a lot. And I guess you see all the references in the film. It's filled with references,
Yeah, you get this sort of these sort of little mysteries that kind of come up. And
yeah. And I mean, more like direct quotes and misquotes.
Yeah.
Like I quoted Baldwin and Audre Lorde, but a lot of Singaporean, Chinese, and I don't know, Omar Khayyam, the Rubaiyat was quoted in there too. Quoted everything because it was just like a very, because I was reading so much, it was just very natural.
Yeah, and there is a lot of, text in the film just in terms of what people are saying, and even, of course, in the case of the cat, you're sort of have to read off the screen.
Yeah.
And I was really struck watching it this time, just the amount, and you were saying this before about doing the sound and the image, the way that the image and sound work together is really kind of sort of, they're sort of disjunctive in a kind of way.
Yeah.
I mean, there are moments where you are watching somebody and they are speaking at that moment, but most of the movie is not synchronized sound necessarily, or it's sound that you've added later or reworked in some other kind of way. So I mean, maybe could you talk about how that process kind of came through? Was it kind of a result of the fact that you had to do all these things at once and couldn't always,
No, it was from the very beginning. I wanted the sound and the image to be off. Like, so it's not completely, how do you call it? It's not completely divergent, but it's not completely together either. So I wanted it to be kind of like just like out of sync, if always the right word. Because sometimes they collide and sometimes they don't, and most of the times they don't, and sometimes they collide back together. But yeah, like I wanted to use images and sound as in many different ways, like sometimes more metaphorically, or sometimes just more for tone or rhythm, or like intensity, And well, mostly because I find like, I mean, if it's just purely representational, I find it boring. So I just try to fuck things up a bit. Yeah.
And I mean, one kind of element that kind of comes through or comes up a number of times is this idea of the past being kind of preserved, or sort of ghosts kind of lingering in different spaces, and obviously there are lots of spaces that we can sort of talk about as well, and images as well. But do you see sound as being kind of similar, or do you see it as being different?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think sound is like the most, it's very hard to lie with sound. I mean, okay. I mean, obviously Hollywood movies lie with sound all the time. But like if you make a film, or if you watch a lot of films, you know that it's like all constructed. Like and that bugs me about like films like that. Like it bugs me that like there's this totality that is constructed, and you're forced to accept it as real. Whereas like I think like, I mean that's why I always want to use like location sound or sync sound, or even like when I put a sound over the other, it's like very obviously stuck together, so kind of so that it doesn't lie, even though it's kind of a lie, but you're aware that it's a lie, so in a way that's truthful. So yeah, like when I was mixing the sound, like the sound mixer would like do some stuff to make it more sound smoother, and I'll be like, no, you should leave all this alone. Or like when I do a reverse shot, and the sound suddenly becomes softer, which is always something people fix, right, in mixing, or they use sound from another take. Like I didn't want to do that because like it had to preserve that weird shift in perspective,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because the early sound. Thinking about just movie history here, it's just like how to even deal with sound and create this kind of unity, as you're saying, of sound and image was a big issue, and whether to do it or not to do it, and how to do it in a sort of realistic way. And we've become very used to watching this in movies, so when you see something like this, it's very different.
But if you see the early sound movies, they were all like, the sound was always throwing you out of the movie, right? Like the Russian movies, the Soviet movies. Or even like Hollywood movies at the time, they were all throwing you out in a sense. But I feel like today, I mean, I think there's a lot of craft in sound. I mean, I'm not saying they have total respect for the people who work in sound, especially because I think the craft in Hollywood now is really sound. It's not the image. Like I think like the image in mainstream movies now is terrible, but the sound, I'm always very impressed by how much detail and how much work people put into it, But at the same time, I'm always very uncomfortable with all the I think when I'm presented with the totality, I cannot get into it. I mean, maybe I'm like different from everybody else. Yeah.
Basically, the way you use the sound, the purring of the cat, was like a theme, like through the film, and also like the leads when the eyes were following. You really felt like people were looking at you here, sitting in the theater. You kind of got that eerie feeling. And the other question that I wanted to ask you is, while you were making the film, was there any controversy about making the film where you were? Did some people take issue with it?
Well, I'll answer the first question first because I'm very inspired by Warhol, because when I first saw Warhol's films, I realized that like it's not me watching the film is less important than the film watching me. So I'm always thinking of that when I'm making my films. So I feel like in this way, like, and that ties back to how I feel about my ambivalence towards cinema. Like I think cinema can turn against you very easily, and you think cinema is giving to you, but it actually is not. It's robbing from you instead. So that feeling is very. I always feel that when I watch films. So I was very like I think I was thinking about that a lot. So you see like the audience watching you, or you see the film being projected back onto you. So you become the screen, and they become the truth, right? Yeah, yeah. Oh no, in fact, like you become the lie and they become the truth, you know? Because when that was what I realized when I saw like the Warhol screen test is like those people in the film, they're dead, you know? And then we watching the film, we will die too. But the film is gonna last longer than any of us, you know? So when people project those films in the cinema, they are watching us, you know, because they are immortal, you know?
At the same time, you had the film burning. You were filming film burning.
Yeah,
at
yeah,
the same
yeah.
time, so
Yeah, yeah. Maybe it's you know, I wanted to kind of destroy it, destroy cinema in a sense. Well,
Is
yeah.
there, I mean, I was curious about the sort of relationship between film and maybe digital video there as well, because obviously we're watching this on digital video from a laptop, and
Right.
I'm assuming probably you edited it
On
on a
yeah.
Steam Deck or
Yeah,
something
yeah,
like that,
yeah,
but you
yeah.
shot it on film.
Yeah.
And maybe if there's a kind of, if there was something that you were thinking about the relationship between those two media in the making of the film, or
Well,
even
there was actually video in the film, so
Yeah, okay.
the scenes where the scenes in the cinema, in the theater, were all video because that wasn't shot by me actually.
Okay.
And there's a story behind that actually. That my friend, I made a film called Eclipses, and my friend made a film of people watching my film. So then I used that film in this new film, and it was only after after I shot everything in my film that I realized that the people he shot in his film appeared in my film too. So they kind of go between. So the film and video link is like this. They're like doubles, right? They're like, you know, this reality fiction, whatever. And the people cross from one reality to another too. So there's this like, you know, crossing of borders between screens, which is what I was talking about earlier too, about how the film can turn against you and you become the lie, and you know, the film becomes the truth, you know. So I think there's this very amorphous boundary between us and the film, and cinema in general, that we can easily cross, you know, from one to another.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think also, like when you watch people watching the film, on the film,
Mm-hmm.
you kind of like digest the film similarly to how they are, because you see their facial expressions, you see, you know, how they're affected by the film, and then you kind of go along with how they're feeling.
Yeah. Like the Kiarostami film, right? But yeah, no, I mean, going back to like the Warhol, you know, talking about Warhol again, you realize that those people in the screen tests are watching you, you know, and you think you're watching them, but they are actually watching you, you know, which always gives me like such a very creepy feeling when I see those films, because
Isn't that like the internet now, like Facebook, everything, you're being watched.
Yeah, right, yeah,
People,
yeah.
They want to know what you're attracted to so they can sell it to you.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's just how it is now.
Yeah. And there's this illusion that we are giving, you know, we are participating when actually we are being participated. Or, you know, I'm not using my words accurately, but you know what I mean.
Do you think people should have the choice to participate or not to participate, or that, you know, they just have to participate because they're part of the process?
Yeah, I don't think we have a choice, right? Like, yeah, I mean, the world is much bigger than we are, and we don't have much say in the world. I mean, of course, we do have say in a very small, you know, way, and with a lot of us, like, you know, things can happen, but all these things are random, and we have no choice about how things happen, right? So, I don't know, I feel that way about cinema too. Yeah.
I mean, coming to a screening and seeing a film, and of course, obviously, that is often presented as a kind of passive experience. And especially if you're thinking about the film watching you rather than you watching the film. But obviously, there's also a lot of chance that can happen in that experience as well. And of course, as we've sort of been talking about, you're also kind of in the process of remaking the film that you're watching as you watch it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Can I ask you about the title?
Snakeskin.
No.
Well, it's not very interesting. Well, I thought it was suitably mysterious, and and then there's this thing about the snake shedding its skin too, and you know, whether things stay the same or things change, or whether the snake is new or the snake is old. But yeah, but the title is just because the guy wrote it on the, the paper, and it was a joke. Yeah.
It's a good. I mean, it's a good title. It's not, you don't have to explain it too much. I had many wild ideas, but I'll leave those behind. But yeah, the shedding of the skin makes a lot of sense, and in a sense, yeah. Yeah.
Plus, I like snakes. I mean, I think they're like they have no bones, so they move like very fluidly. You know, kind of like how I want the film to be too. Like really fluid between boundaries, between fiction and documentary, between sound and image, between the people going in between, you know, to past and present, going through time, you know, or the transmogrification of souls, transmigration of souls. Sorry.
Well, on that note, I mean, what is the sort of one thing that's interesting about it? The film is, of course, you present this sort of frame idea of looking at these images from the future, but you have a very kind of specific idea of the future in mind. I mean, in fact, you even list some events that happened between now and 2066, right? On some of the title cards, you know, this happened. The cemetery was demolished for, you know,
but that's true. Like they're planning to do that.
Okay. So you're not. It's not just a prediction.
Not
it's
making
like it's actually a plan.
And they're already destroying it. So like they plan to completely destroy it by that date, but they're already starting to destroy it. You know. So it's already happening.
But but that's in itself interesting. Is that you're positioning the perspective of the sort of narrator who's sort of framing this film is one from a very particular kind of future, and not an open future, possibly not even a happy future. I don't know. I mean, there's many ways in which artists use this device of time travel to kind of rethink, you know, what could be, right? But it seems like you have a very kind of, I don't know, I don't want to, you know, sort of put you in a box, but it seems like you have a kind of idea that this is heading a very specific direction.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, the film is kind of about the genealogy, right? Like about, you know, Sangnila Utama. I don't know if you guys remember. He's the guy who founded Singapore. So there's Sangnila Utama, then there's Stamford Raffles, the British guy, and then there's Lee Kuan Yew, and then there's this cult leader. And, you know, they're kind of all the same person reincarnating into each other. I don't know how I feel about that either. Like I don't think I'm completely sure either, because it's a very depressing view of history that it never changes. But I mean, so far it really hasn't changed in Singapore, you know. So I don't know. I guess it's a way of trying to force me to think about these things too. Yeah.
And that this kind of time travel is it's sort of variations, but also kind of circularity as well. Kind of both of those things.
Yeah, I mean, all of them, I mean, I wanted to, so when I was thinking of how to portray the past, right, at one point I was flirting with the idea of actually shooting scenes in the past, so people dress in period costumes and all that. And then I realized that, I mean, I don't know, there's something vulgar about that, you know, I don't know, for me, you know. So I had like people who were present day people playing people of the past, so there's already this disconnect there, or like there's this sense of reincarnation already, or avatars, you know, they are like avatars of the past.
Even the cat.
Which was, he was supposed to be speaking Japanese because he was a Japanese ghost, and I actually wanted to get my Japanese friend to do it, and then I thought it was too funny, like it would be like a Miyazaki film.
It would be like maybe like Spirited Away. I don't know,
So I was like, okay, let's just use it as subtitles.
I'm not trying to remember. Well, anyway, I had a digression about cats, but I think we'll leave that.
Well, yeah, a lot of people say Chris Marker because of the cat.
Yeah, I guess so.
But I really wasn't thinking about Chris Marker.
I want to hear some more questions from more people, or you can ask questions of the audience as well. That's allowed. If, you know, make them you know, involve them in the past.
Well, what do you guys think? Like, did you find it interesting or boring or really shitty or I want to know.
It was like watching like 7 films at the same time.
Yeah, I kind of have a numerology obsession with the number 7 especially.
Did that factor into how you, do you construct films in that way? Like, are you editing with that in mind, or?
Yeah.
We're getting really personal now. This is obsessive.
I kind of do. It's like really easy to do. In my first film, first feature-length film, Eclipses, there was really the number 7, and this is repeated thing. So I don't know. It's like easier for me to think.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I just want to go back to your very initial question. Was the construction of it really found in the editing room, or was there a process of writing it and figuring out the structure early on and then shooting, or?
No, it was all written out. Well, not like the sequence, but like the stories were all, all written out. And then I was just finding places to link things. So like places to link the sound and the image, and the places to link the stories together. Yeah.
So you scripted the whole thing?
Yeah, but the editing was very easy. Like it took a month. Like it was, and this was the first cut. I never did any other. I was like, oh. So maybe some people think it's too rough, or.
Yeah. That's. I mean, that is surprising that it was the first. That it was the first cut. You didn't change it at all.
No, I like added like a few sounds and like intertitles. That's it.
Right. Yeah.
But like I think, so maybe like version 1.5.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't show it to anyone even. Like I was like, I think I like this. I'm just gonna use this.
Yeah. It's funny because a lot of people. A lot of the convention with a lot of people is, okay, we'll start with the 5-hour cut, and then we'll go for the 4-hour cut, and then the 3-hour cut, and then eventually we'll have an hour and 45-minute movie or something like that. But you just went for, let's go for the hour and 45, and then.
No, I was like, let's go for 60 minutes, and then it became long. And
okay.
I was like, oh no. I wanted it to be short. It was actually supposed to be like a medium-length film, and then it became long.
Yeah.
Well, then the other question is when this man was running, and how oppressed he felt, and he couldn't be with the people that he loved.
Yeah.
And how that circumstance lended itself to possibly like mental illness, like the way he was reacting. Was it his voice? Was it someone else's voice?
Yeah.
That it's a perfectly normal reaction to become ill, mentally ill, under such stressful circumstances.
Right.
And that just kind of naturally occurred in your movie.
Yeah, I mean his story is a real story. I met this guy and his life is like ruined because of because he was running away from the government. So it's real. But then also after that I had a dream about, after he told me the story, and I'm a really obsessive person, so I think about stuff like all the time. And then I had a dream about that I was him, and then I started to, not recognize my voice and everything. So it was kind of half me, half him.
Kind of like became.
Yeah, which is I guess like the the kind of like the film like it's all.
It confuses us as well because like we start to become that person, and when the cat's purring, the theme of that purring, it kind of like draws you in, emotionally. You're like you're in the movie. Like that's kind of how I felt. Like there is no way out.
Yeah. When I was first editing the film, I cried. Like at when the song came out, I cried. I mean, how pathetic am I? I'm like editing my own film and crying at my own film. But I kind of get like this, like when I would insert jokes in the film and I would be laughing at myself, like ha ha ha, this is so funny, ha 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 ha, and I would amuse myself. Like sometimes nobody laughs in the theater, but it's okay. Like I got a kick out of it.
Well, when you think about it, musicians they're going to make music for themselves, and then if it resonates with other people, that's like the sign of something good.
Yeah.
You just don't want something to be pop art. It just.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I I don't really have like something against pop, but like I feel like when I'm making the film, I think of myself as the first audience, like whether I'm bored or whether I'm like interested. So that's why, like, when I finished the first cut, I was like, I like this film. I don't care if anybody else likes it. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've made films where I, like, really hated, and, like, even though other people say they like the film, it doesn't change my opinion of the film, and I still won't show those films, you know?
Why do you think, I mean, maybe this is a strange question maybe, but why do you think this film you did not have that experience with? Is it something about this film that...
Why did I like the film?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I can understand, and I think everybody probably can understand this idea that you make something and you're like, and you spend a lot of time with it and you're like, I don't want to look at this thing ever again. I'm sick of it and I hate it.
Yeah, yeah.
But in this case, actually, you've had that experience before, but in this case you didn't. Is there a particular reason why you think that is?
I think there's a reason why I hate my films. I don't know if there's a reason why I like my films.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's this film that I made that I really, really hate, and nobody else has seen it. I hate it because it was too beautiful. Like, I had a cinematographer and all that, and the shots were very gorgeous. And I hated it. I wanted to destroy it. You know, I'm like the monk in the Mishima novel.
Yeah.
You know, what's it called? Golden Temple.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember.
Yeah, the Temple of the Golden Pavilion, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, who sees this like beautiful thing and he hates it so much he wants to burn it down. You know, kind of like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, maybe that's part of the film is this sort of like burning down is part of it, and you know.
Yeah, I think there's something in me that I'm always trying to rebel against myself, like, or destroy my own films somehow. So, like this film, like I did everything that I hate in cinema. So, like I hate handheld cameras, so I purposely did it. I hate all these like, you know, really rough zooms, so I did that. I hate like, you know, like when the film rolls out and all these like gimmicky imperfections. So I put it in. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hate appearing in films, so I force my, you know, I want. That's why.
But all those imperfections, that's what makes it so perfect. You know, that's what carries you along. I think so.
But I like this idea of forcing yourself to do things that you really don't. I mean, I think a lot of people get into very kind of like you know, you start repeating yourself, and this is very true, especially for, you know, somebody who's a filmmaker who's trying to sort of establish their like their brand or whatever, or they're trying to be an auteur, and you know they want to be their distinctive style. To do these things that you actually resist doing or even hate doing, I think is a really interesting impulse.
Well, because people start repeating themselves and then they become so boring. Like a lot of, you know, famous filmmakers, they get famous and they become very boring.
Yeah.
But my next film, I'm always very afraid of making like a conventional feature film, so-called, like with people talking, like actually talking, you know. So I think I want to do that.
Okay. Have you started? Is this something that you're working on now? Or?
Yeah. I've been working on it for a long time, but recently, the last 2 years, I've been working on it more. So, and it's really hard. It's really hard.
Yeah.
But it's fun.
And involves like scripted dialogue and all these.
Yeah,
like,
I don't know if I can go that far, but but you know, fiction. Yeah. I mean, for a long time, I was making documentaries because I couldn't make fiction films anymore. Yeah. So now I want to try to do something I hate again. Yeah.
But this is, of course, somewhere in between those two things, right? So in some ways, this kind of bridges, very emphatically bridges the documentary and the fiction and the science fiction and fantasy and those things.
I guess I was kind of flirting with the fiction part already. Like with writing, actually, I have always had a huge fear of writing. And for once, like I wrote like the entire thing, you know. But we'll see.
Yeah.
I don't know, sorry if this is boring.
More questions? More thoughts? Yeah.
In the film where you wanted to talk about you know, history and the way it's told and represented, at what point and why did you feel necessary that you wanted to manipulate things like time and history? Like, why did you want to set it in boundaries outside of our current time period?
Well, yeah, you know, because like I wanted people to not take. I mean, there's this like complacency in Singapore, you know, that nothing ever changes and nothing will change. And I mean, it has to do with the same party ruling the country for 50 years, you know. It has to do with there are no seasons in Singapore. Every single day is exactly the same. It's always the same weather. You wake up and it's always the same weather. So it is this sense of like stillness and like the feeling that nothing ever moves at all. So yeah, in a sense, I wanted to be able to see the present as like it's changeable, you know, like it's not like something set in stone, you know, yeah.
And working with this idea of like the fact that people think things are staying constant, and the fact that you see change, do you think that in some way reflected upon, you know, your editorial decisions and stuff? Like, you know, you said you did stuff that you really normally didn't do, stuff that you didn't like. Was that, do you think, birthed out of the idea of this whole sense of not remaining the same, seeing change in other things?
I never thought about it that way. I thought of it as more like me being uncomfortable with myself, or just me being like rebellious in my own way, of course, you know, like I want to be punk, you know. So I'm just like, yeah, whatever, you know, like I'll just like do everything that I hate, you know.
But I like that. I mean, this idea that even you're challenging yourself as a way of getting out of your own sort of static kind of cycles or yeah.
Yeah,
Leaves.
yeah. But it really helps you. It helps me think of new things by like setting rules or challenges, you know. Because I mean, you know, it's easy to stay the same, of course, like, you know, to come up with a formula, whatever. But then also like, it's hard, like, because you can do everything, you know. I mean, you can do anything. When you set rules and then you you set rules and then you like rebel against those rules or you play with those rules. I don't know. Like for me, like I find it more inspiring, I guess. Yeah.
I got one more question. For you, what do you think is like the most genuine a documentary can ever become? Like for you, even so, you talk about this idea that, you know, whether you want it or not, cinema can take on these characteristics of like a transformative nature on the subject it shoots and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So at what point do you think, could documentary ever be truly true, or is it always, you know, something documented through the mindset of another person?
Yeah, it's always both, right? I mean, that's what's so interesting about cinema, right? That it's like never one or the other. Even in like purely fictional film, like there's some documentary aspect to it because you're putting someone in front of the camera and this thing is actually happening in front of the camera, right? And same as documentary, there's like, who was it who said like the nearer you go to fiction, I mean, if you approach the closer you approach fiction, the more you get documentary. The closer you approach documentary, the more you get fiction. And it's kind of true, like, actually, like everything in this film was true. Like it either happened to me or to my friends or to, you know, somebody in real life, or somebody I interviewed or a historical figure. So all the stories are true, but it's like fiction, you know? Like somehow, like when you put it on screen, it becomes like fiction. And it's strange. But everything was true. Everything was true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, even dreams are true. You know, it's not like they don't exist.
Yeah, right.
They happen,
yeah,
and
exactly.
how to record those is just as recording the past is of course difficult / impossible, but also something that you can do in a film.
Yeah, that's why I guess there's something vulgar about. That's why I thought like setting it in the past would be vulgar because it would be pretending a falsehood is true, like taking a falsehood as very true, and not questioning that, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I mean, emphasizing places, these locations is like a really sort of, I think it's a kind of, I don't know, it makes a lot of sense that you would indicate these sort of historical events through the places as they are in kind of the present day. And you can see so much even if something looks completely different as it did a couple of hundred years ago.
Yeah.
Just by looking at this sort of location. Which is what
yeah.
I mean. A lot of the film is looking at these locations.
Yeah, like the street where it used to be, full of labor unions has a building called Fortune Center. That's so ironic. Anyway. More questions.
What is the message you want to leave us with at the end of the movie? You see, she's got that on the manual. But what happens next? What didn't we see?
I don't know. That's my honest answer.
We need to go in the future.
Yeah, maybe we need to put on the helmet to find out and go to that place. But no, I mean, that's why I cut before anything happened, because my original... I did, yeah. And that was the biggest question that I was trying to figure out. And I think I still don't have the answer. I think that's my honest answer. Because my original plan was to have her go into the forest and to CGI her disappearing like with a flash of light, like this, And then I thought, I don't know if I like that, because it's kind of very hopeless that the only way you can deal with the present is to go back into the past. It's this very hopeless kind of nostalgia that I was very uncomfortable with. So I had like many conversations with a lot of people. It's like, I don't know how to end this film. I don't know if she should disappear and if she should really go into the past and time travel. So I didn't make a decision. I
We
cut.
can make our own decisions as to what happened.
What?
We can make our own decisions as to what happens next.
Maybe, yeah.
It's possible the time traveling helmet that he bought on eBay
Yeah.
doesn't actually work.
Malfunctioned.
Yeah. In which case, you have to do something else, right? You have to make a movie, or you have to...
Also, the guy, the time traveler, he's a filmmaker. So just now I was watching, I was like, yeah, maybe I should have said time traveler / filmmaker. Well, no, that would be too much.
You've only done one edit, so maybe it's now. You could just change that title card.
Special edition, director's cut.
Yeah.
And then I'll make her disappear, maybe finally. I don't know.